Productive Pastor 3, 3 key sermon preparation systems. What's going on, friends? Welcome back. Productive Pastor Chad Brooks is here. It's great to have you, man, on the show. We've not had new content in a month. First new content episode of 2023, and I'm stoked to talk about 3 key sermon preparation systems. You know, if you've ever just struggled with writing Saturday night specials, or where do my ideas come from, or just this desire to have the margin for greater creativity in your messages, we're going to talk about all of that today. Before we jump into that, I just want to put one thing in front of you. You know, we relaunched the Becoming Productive course last week. Sent out the stuff. We've had dozens of folks who purchased Season 1 workbook. Grab that for free. And so, go back, listen to that. If you bought the Season 1 workbook, haven't got an email from me yet, go check out the last episode of what I talked about. But also this, if you're wanting to start off 2023 saying, I need to get my life together, my stuff under control, I need to be productive, I need my own system, I need to start this, understand this, all these sorts of things, this course is for you. It's 11 modules. It's a companion to Season 1 of the podcast, and it goes from A to Z of building out a personal approach to productivity. First half digs into a lot of the awareness and the why, and the second half literally takes you through the calendar year on building out your own approach to productivity. So it's $50. Like, that's cheap. Like, tons and tons and tons of content, and it's $50. It's right there. You find the link in the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/043 to get becoming productive and to just start off on that journey. Well, let's get into the content here. 3 key sermon preparation systems. And this is the thing. I realized this last year. So if you think back to the average church budget, the most expensive line item normally is staff payroll. And in most churches, the primary teaching pastor, preacher, whatever you want to call it in your system, generally has the largest line item in that staff payroll line item. And if you think about what the responsibility of the pastor is primarily, most folks are going to say that there's a lot of things you cannot do, but if you don't show up on Sunday with a sermon, a committee meeting might be called. Let's just put it that way. Sermons are actually, I think, one of the most expensive things that the local church pays for. Like, it is one of the most just crucial things that's going on there. But what's so funny is I talk to pastors all of the time that their sermon preparation gets pushed off to the edges of their schedule. It gets the worst of their time, not the best of their time. So it's just intriguing how this most expensive thing is also this most difficult thing sometimes just to have the time to focus on. And sermons, and I want to talk about these systems and why these systems are going to help alleviate some of that. And there's a lot of different reasons. One, ideas marinate. We want them to sit inside of our head. They get better. You might be a crock pot person. I'm not that much of a crock pot person, but I am a cast iron Dutch oven on the smoker person. Kind of the same thing right there. Ideas need to marinate, they need to braise, they need to cook down, they need to become condensed. First round is never as good as 10th round, but 10th round seems to take forever when you start from square one every single week on Monday morning. There's also the dreaded Saturday night special. Like, have you ever gone up to preach a sermon that the ink is still wet? I remember one time I preached and I thought it was an all right sermon, and my worship leader was we had a good relationship, and I went to them and said, how do you feel like that was? And they looked at me and said, Chad, that was like a Wednesday sermon. It needed a few more days to refine. But sometimes the weeks are just so crazy, we can't find the time for that sort of thing to happen. And there's also this, that when we begin getting several steps forward inside of this, we gain the ability for your sermons to be strategic. So if you've ever been into a campaign, or if there is a growing edge in your church that is going to need focus, but in unique and different and special ways, all these sorts of things. Like, this is where your sermons become strategic. And it's really difficult for them to be strategic if you're always at square one, starting from scratch on Mondays. And so any sort of ground you can gain inside of this is going to bring you a myriad of healthier results. And honestly, you get to be just a better steward of the resources that you have. So the three key systems, and this whole thing started out actually as a tweet on Twitter that turned into an atomic essay on Twitter, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from stuff, and somebody said something, and I feel like I have to say it here. There's a caveat here. This isn't one of the systems, but it's an assumption that I'm beginning from, that you as a teacher of Scripture have a robust and healthy relationship with the text. And so you have a deep well where you devotionally, in a personal way, are coming at, and that is this beginning point that you start from. There's probably another podcast episode out there for, when pastors struggle with that. Actually, I did a YouTube video pretty recently explaining how, my own scripture pattern is a little rough right now, but how I'm coming at that. I'll link that in the show notes as well. But let's get into these three systems. And these aren't going to be that surprising. But some of this is like 101 stuff that people have asked questions about, and so I want to just kind of make sure I go through this. So the three key sermon preparation systems. The first system you need a preaching calendar. The fall planning cohort, we did an entire 2-hour session on a preaching calendar, and a lot of the folks on there started out without one and left with 12 months of preaching planned out. Now, that might seem absolutely insurmountable to you, but I can tell you it's possible. You could sit down, and I bet you in a half of a day, you could come up with a 12-month calendar. And here's the thing. It's not a rigid idea, but it's just saying, hey, this is the format that I want to go at. And there's something about when you pull back and look at your larger calendar of the things that you have to do, the things you have to think about, the things that you want to be able to do, all of that. And when you pull back and look 12 months out, you can begin sequencing things. And so you think about this, you say, you want to preach a sermon series on the fruits of the Spirit. You want to preach a sermon series of, Moses and the Exodus, this sort of thing. You begin to ask yourself the questions, where does my community need to grow this year? What are the things that are the most pressing? All these sorts of filtering questions that you can ask yourself, and then you can begin sitting down and kind of plotting out, okay, I know that the words of Jesus are really, really critical to my people right now. And so that happening before these fruits of the Spirit might make more sense. So let me, come up with a 4-week series on what these key teachings of Jesus is, that sort of thing. And you can sit down, and like I said, you don't have to sit it in stone, but getting something down just for every Sunday of the year lets you begin thinking forward. Okay, just be able to think forward is huge. The first superpower you unlock with having a preaching calendar is this. You just have it as a calendar, and in its most basic sense, I started off doing this years ago. It was just a file in Evernote that had no tables, nothing fancy whatsoever. It just had the date, had a sermon title, and had a text, and that was it. And I'll tell you what, just having that, if you don't have anything, it's going to be a lot stronger than what you had before. But then the next level is this, is you setting up your calendar in a way that you can actually use it. So I build my preaching calendar now in Trello. Surprise, surprise for folks that know me. But I do it that way so I can move things around. And so Sundays can be, it's just all the benefits of Trello I get combined with my preaching calendar. So I have that right there in front of me. But I live in a Trello-centric world in my mind. And so that's there. But also because it's in Trello, I have the ability, this is sneaking over a little bit into the next system, but because it's in Trello, it gives me the ability to drop things in there and leave things in there. And so just having a preaching calendar is going to be huge. Okay, this is like a 101 level of preaching calendar. I'm sure that there's questions. If you have a question about this, hit me up on Twitter at Rev Chad Brooks and ask me a question about a preaching calendar. That's the best way to do it. But this is, like I said, this is 101 for preaching calendar. There's so much more I could go into this. But really just declaring and saying this is what's going on in an order that makes sense to how your community is growing and where you are going is going to just be a game changer, get you further down the road. Now, the second sermon preparation system that's just amazing and it's easy and critical is to have a capture system. Okay, if you've said these are the messages I'm going to preach, 3 months out, 6 months out, 12 months out, all these sorts of things, you can start off just with a Google Doc saying this is what it is. But then if you build up something that allows you to capture information as you think, as you read, as you do all of the things, it's going to be super far, because this is the deal. When you know what's going on, you'll start noticing things. I remember when I was about to get married, my car died. I had a few $1,000s. I called my dad. My parents were able to get together a little bit of money as well. And Dad's like, okay, I'm going to go find you a car. And I told him, like, this is what I need. And he's like, okay. He called me back, says, I've got this. It was an old Jeep Grand Cherokee. And so he had the money. I had the money, got it to him, bought the car. And he said, it's green. I'm like, okay, I've never seen a green Grand Cherokee before, Dad. And we meet halfway, get the Jeep. And I like it a lot, but it's this weird color that I swear I had never seen ever before in my life. And like a week later, I saw another one, and then I saw another one. And the next thing I know, I realized this weird colored green Jeep is all over the road, but I had never seen it before. Have you had something like that happen to you? That's what happens when you know what you're preaching out and you've got a capture system. You will start coming across things you're reading. You'll come across stories, maybe YouTube videos, articles on the internet, tweets, all of these sorts of things, and you can begin dropping them into your capture system for these future messages. And the deeper you can go, the better it's going to be. So like the ideal is to get down to where every sermon has its own specific, place that you drop it into. I normally build these out 3 months in advance, and I use Trello and also use GoodNotes 5. I'm a hardcore analog guy that has learned the benefits of going digital because of the recallability, but also it's really hard to copy paste an image or something into a paper notebook. And so what I do is every month I build out the next third month in GoodNotes and just give it its own document file. So I'm recording this at the beginning of February. I just did this for April and May. And then I take that one file. So the first Sunday in May, I go into GoodNotes, I grab that link, and I get that inside of my Trello folder. So I can link to my capture system directly from Trello. It makes things just like significantly easier that the two of them right there cross together. And so whatever I find, I can always go into that GoodNotes folder and I can drop that in there. And you'd be blown away with what you can find. Because when you're aware, you begin noticing things. And so another hot tip is this: have a file in your capture system for future ideas. For sermons you think that might expand beyond this year, just drop ideas in there. This helps you never start from scratch. So imagine you open up on Monday, you open the file up and you've got 4, 5, 6 weeks worth of ideas, quotes, all the stuff that's just there. And so you're automatically not starting from scratch. You automatically just have a library built up of content around this thing that you are preaching. And so my capture system is this combination of Trello and GoodNotes 5 on the iPad, and it works beautifully for me. The last sermon preparation rhythm is this: it's having a writing rhythm. And this is a two-parter right here. The first is this: what order do you write sermons? So think about that. What's the order that you write sermons in? Do you just kind of I worked with a pastor one time that literally on Monday morning would write the first sentence of his sermon. And he literally did all of his sermon preparation in a linear format with his manuscript all week. I couldn't do that. But think about what do you do first? And the reason I'm saying this is you'll be blown away when you've got, your calendar, you've got your capture system, and you've got your writing rhythm. You will begin having the ability to work on multiple messages at the same time. And to activate this, what you really have is this, what your writing rhythm is. And so I'll talk about that now. My writing rhythm really is 4 phases. Number 1, it's big ideas. And that's where I'm reading the preaching passage and just doing some work on that. And just like, it's big ideas. It's just charting stuff out. It's 30,000 foot stuff, just making a map, a roadmap of where I need to go for the rest of it. Then I have my research, and my research really is broken down into like 3 things. The first is the language and word studies. The next is the context, and context can be really, really varied for me, but that can kind of pull into maps, other passages, where this is in the narrative, all that kind of stuff. And then the third part of research for me is commentary research. But all those things are what I call research. And then you have editing. And I've said before in my own preparation, I am always prepping to preach. And so I'm making outlines multiple times as I'm working on a message inside of there. But there's the editing. That's the wordsmithing. That's taking this from something that exists inside of your head to the thing that you're going to talk out loud. And then there's the actual writing. Like for me, that's kind of the 4 phases that are there, but I know this is the order that things need to happen in. The next part of having a writing rhythm is this. It's knowing when you write and declaring some things there. Now, I've had people before that I know. I've had folks in. I've got a preaching cohort that's going to have another section coming up this summer, coming up later on this spring, called Preaching Through Distractions, where we had somebody in there that sat down one day a week and did all of their message on that one day a week. And I know there's folks out there, and if you can do that, I'm envious of you for multiple levels. But what I've found to be helpful, and what a lot of other folks have found it helpful, is say, we're going to spend a few hours each day at our prime time working on our messages. And so this is what it means. It means on Mondays, you do X. On Tuesdays, you do Y. On Wednesdays, you do Z. On Thursdays, I got this out of order, but you get the drift. Like for me, on Mondays, I just do big idea work. And I section off like 2 hours to do big idea work. And I'll be honest with you, if I get done with my big idea work on one message and my brain and my mind is still doing really well, I go to the next week and I do big idea work on that week. So you see how this kind of, it snowballs over. And what you'll find is it doesn't take much attention. Maybe, a couple of 3 weeks of low-level attention, or really 1 week of like focused attention. And you can get your messages ahead an additional week, which just gives it more time just to simmer in the crock pot. So just, think about, what you write, when you write, what order that is, but also declaring that time and saying, on Mondays, this is when I read my passage. On Tuesdays, I do my commentary work. On Wednesdays, I go into some maps and some language stuff, and I make a rough outline. And on Thursdays, I finish my outline, and I have it ready to preach, and I make my slides. So you think about what your writing rhythm is inside of that. So there you go. 3 systems, 3 key sermon preparation systems. I'm telling y'all, friends, if you've got this going on, you're going to be surprised at how much easier it is for sermon preparation to be manageable, to preach messages in a way that are clear, to where you're not like fighting the anxiety of, am I going to say this right? You're going to have the time to put all of that stuff together. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And so I would love to hear from you what you think about this. On Twitter, at RevChadBrooks is a great way to get a hold of me about this. Would love just to have that conversation. Or you can pop over to the Productive Pastor community on Facebook. The link to that's inside of the show notes, but I call that the Productivity Party. That's another fantastic place to have these discussions about sermon preparation. Folks always love to talk about writing sermons, and so you post a question in there, you'll most likely hear a lot from people. And then last is just kind of wrap this up, and I mentioned it in here. I am going to have another section of my learning cohort, Preaching Through Distractions, starting this March. I don't have a link for it just yet, but this is the thing. It's going to probably be 12 people max, and we've got the whole Productive Pastor crew that's part of this, and also Passion and Partnership, the company I work with, is part of it as well. So those 12 slots will fill up quick. The best way to know about what's going on with there is to follow up the emails. And so you can go to the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/043, and sign up for the Productive Pastor emails, because that's really where I communicate with people about any sort of learning cohort and courses that go there. But friends, it's great to be back. Great to have new, fun, original content. 3 key sermon preparation rhythms, and I'm gonna cut out right now because I'm gonna go work on messages. These rhythms, these systems have allowed me to be ahead, and I'm going to keep that momentum going. But I would love to hear from you about your own sermon prep questions and the stuff that you might have and how we could have a future conversation about that. So until the next episode, I'm Chad Brooks. It's great to have you as part of Productive Pastor, and we will talk later on.